growing food together is definitely an empowering experience. I have 50 pictures of people holding up giant potatoes and giant carrots saying, I grew this. And it's just really amazing to see how excited people get when they realize they can meet their own needs and basically have fun doing it.
Wow.
It's really, really a sweet sense of having access to caring for ourselves.
This is Peak Moment. We are living at a peak of human innovation, information, wealth, and health. But we're also at a peak of population and consumption, with rising temperatures and declining resources fueled by cheap oil and gas. Peak Moment Television, bringing you examples of positive responses to energy decline and climate change through local community action.
Hi, welcome to Peak Moment. I'm in Port Townsend, and I'm visiting again with a guest from 2006, Judy Alexander, who asked, how much food can I grow in my own garden for myself and my neighbors? You've expanded that question. Tell us about it.
Well, I really enjoyed growing food in my yard, and I still grow food in my yard. But about 4 years ago, right after you left, I got involved in a committee called the Food Resiliency Action Group, part of our transition town called Local 2020. And we decided that our mission, this particular committee's mission initially, was to create as many community gardens in our county as we could. We had about 3 operating at the time, and within a year or two we went up to 25.
25?
Yeah.
You took that seriously.
We did. We took it seriously, but it was also very much fun, and people were ready for it. I mean, it was one of those ideas that it was timely.
How did you go about that?
Well, the committee was pretty innovative in all the different ways we worked together. We invited people to start community gardens. We gave them tools to work with, like one of the guys on the committee was a matchmaker, and he would take names of people that had land.
Okay.
They were willing to donate for garden purposes, and he took names of people that wanted to garden that didn't have land.
Great.
And he would put the two together. So some of them started that way. Some of them started because a church had land that they wanted to create a garden on, and people came to the land that way. There was a community center down in South County that the whole town showed up to create this garden. It's a small town of maybe 500 or 1,000 people, and a lot of people got involved in that project. So the land came from private ownership, it came from commercial buildings, it came from church buildings. One school donated land to put a bunch of fruit trees on it.
Go back one step. How did you get the word out that you wanted to help Habitat happen? I mean, it sounds like, were you just catalysts, or was there a big organization how did you go?
We had some support from the press.
Oh.
This town, word of mouth works really well.
Okay.
We hooked up with the Master Gardeners Association, and they ended up starting an entire grant process to help fund these gardens. They have a secret garden tour every year, and we were given access to the proceeds from the tour with applications from the various gardens that wanted fencing or water system components. And so we had the hardware stores. One of the committee members took on the task of going to the hardware stores and the garden store to get discount cards. So if you garden in a community garden, you get a 20% discount on whatever the garden needs. So it was a very collaborative, dynamic, creative process, and I'm sure there's community gardens that exist that I don't know about, but on our website we did put up profiles of the gardens, and so each garden would have their picture, a little description of what they were attempting to do, where they were located, who the contact person was, and we asked the gardens to do 35 frequently asked questions for how to start a community garden.
Okay.
And so each garden coordinator took the time to answer those questions, and so when someone came on to start one, they would have a ton of assistance just on the website. So that protected us from having to answer a million questions from new gardens all the time.
So you want to tell me about sort of the model? Did we cover the model of how you went about organizing this? Or?
Well, I was thinking at the front end of this that, first of all, we wanted people's gardens to be something they could walk to. You know, our organization is about sustainability. We didn't want people driving in their cars 10 miles to get to their food. So we decided to make them, for the most part, neighborhood-based community gardens. So like someone called me to say, could she be in this garden? And she lives probably a quarter mile outside the boundaries of what we think of as the Dundee Hill neighborhood. And I told her no. And I figured that if we could do the containment at the neighborhood level, that's the model that would take. And it's paid off, because I think I can only think of a couple gardens that are not neighborhood based. So people are walking to their food source, they're getting to know their neighbors, they're forming community. The model, the big difference in our model for gardens is that most community gardens in Seattle, for instance, are what are called pea patches. And that means that everyone has their own 10-foot by 20-foot plot next to another person's plot, next to another person's plot. And there's long, long waiting lists for people to get into those pea patch gardens in Seattle. And we decided that we didn't want the pea patch model. We wanted to do a cooperative model. And so, without realizing the benefits exactly, we started the gardens where everybody would grow food together, and everybody would harvest food together, and everybody would work together. Everybody would put up the deer fence together, and people would pool their money for whatever they needed to buy in the way of seeds. And it kind of throws us into this melting pot of the need to cooperate out of this common goal and common purpose that we have.
Absolutely. That's different than your own little the pea patch sounds like suburbs recreated. I have my own little parcel.
Exactly. It sort of emphasizes that individualism that's really at the core of why our culture is so unsustainable. So the cooperative model, what I found was it made it easier for people to get into a community garden, because they didn't feel like they had to have all the skills. I mean, people in a pea patch will only start a pea patch if they kind of know how to garden already, and they need a little finesse, maybe asking questions to the patch owner next to them. But here, we have people that have never gardened in their lives willing to join us because they know they will be helped and taught and supported through the process of learning. So,
I would imagine, did you have any criteria, like at least one or two of the garden members have to have already known how to garden, or is it just happened because those interests were some folks already had that interest?
It was really organic, Janae. It was, we didn't have any criteria. Anybody could join that wanted to. We barely came up with criteria for like work expectations. We came up with an amount of money that we thought would be good to kick in, because it seemed like about how much we needed, and we charged more for a couple than for a single, and more for a family than a couple. But we didn't have rigid or tight parameters, and it's been, for me, that's been one of the frustrations, is that people kind of do what they're ready to do, and it's not always equal. But it's like learning that that's okay. That is really the way our culture is. Nothing is fair, nothing is equal.
That's true.
So we try not to focus on that. We try to keep it fun. And just, what I've found is that people tend to harvest according to their input in the garden.
Really?
Yeah.
That kind of built-in sort of honesty about it? Or...
Exactly.
Wow.
Exactly. It's surprising, because most people come into a community situation fearing they're not going to get all that they want. And what I've found is that one of the challenges of this type of community garden is that people are reluctant to harvest until they've been here for a while, and they realize it's okay to take. So it's really shown me something about human nature.
Wow, that is interesting.
It's shocking how reluctant people are to take when they're part of a community. It's like we have to sit down and talk to each other. It's like, okay, I'm never going to harvest beets. I don't like beets, but boy, I'm going to really help myself to the potato patch or the peas or the raspberries. And so we've recognized that people have different preferences, different inclinations, eat different amounts, harvest different. So it's, and as far as the model, there is another thing where, like, we have a 70-year-old gentleman in our garden, and really he can't get down on his hands and knees to plant, garden, or really even harvest. But what he does is he keeps our grass weed whacked. He suits himself up with a face mask and ear, protection, and does all of our weed whacking, and we give him food. So
so what you're saying is everybody has a place. They find their place.
They find their niche. They find their gift, their talent. They give that. They feel great about what they're giving. That's what makes it work. It's really, really great. And if you get a big enough garden and you plant more than what you think you're going to need, you'll have a range of talents that all the bases get covered, and you'll have stuff left over to give to the food bank, and people won't squabble about stuff because there's always extra.
So what you also are finding out, showing, is there's abundance.
Yeah.
We can live by abundance and not scarcity.
Yeah.
Because it sounds to me like people are enjoying coming and being part of this. There's more to it than just planting food.
Oh God, it's like, you know, when we have the work parties, even though they're not as frequent as I might prefer, when we have the work parties, people love being here together. They love sharing stories. They love talking about what's next and who's going to plant the second row of spinach. Or one woman in another community garden told me, she said, it just doesn't feel right when everyone isn't here. You know, it just feels like this is a community project, so we need to all be here, or at least a number of us, to feel that sense of shared experience. And she was a regular individual gardener like I was, and she loves the community feeling instead.
We probably have about 8 or 10 minutes left, and so I want to make sure that you had a number of points that you really want to make sure, particularly if people want to take this model and run with it.
Well, we do have a lot of, as I said, the assistance on our website about frequently asked questions, but we also have listed other types of resources that we've found useful. I think the thing that, we also set up a Yahoo group of all the community gardens so that the community gardens can talk in between gardens. So one guy decided he would put in a group order for seeds in the spring, and he puts it out to the whole list of community gardens.
Great.
And he's a database guy. He doesn't mind putting all the lists together and figuring out which garden owes which amount of money. And he's negotiated savings from different seed companies because we're ordering en masse.
Yes, yes.
So it's just the nature of our community, I think, at this point, to collaborate, cooperate, communicate in ways that we can, and we use the tools to make that work.
Tell us your website while we're here.
It's L2020, the numbers 2020.org.
Okay.
L2020.org, that stands for local2020.org.
Okay, great,
So,
good.
I think one of the things I haven't mentioned is the intergenerational aspect of the community gardens. Our oldest community garden member is 82, and our youngest is 1.5 years old. And there's a lot of interaction between kids and adults.
Wow.
The kids will come in the garden gate and disappear to the raspberry patch for at least a half an hour. They're totally happy and quiet. The mom gets to garden.
I'm sitting in the middle of Wayward Farm Community Garden, and my guest is Celia Carnigan, one of the gardeners here. You know, your son Ray is here, and I think that the story of his being part of the gardening, what's it been like?
Oh, it's been wonderful. He was in on it from the very first day that the garden started, and he loves dirt more than anything in the world, so he had a city lot full of dirt that he got to dig in.
God, a kid's paradise.
3 days a week, and he just loved it. He never let me miss a single day, no matter whether it was raining, it was muddy, nothing. So he was here every single day. His only sad thing that's happened is the dirt's been slowly cultivated. So the garden agreed to give him his own patch of dirt to do with whatever he wanted. If he wanted to plant, he could plant. If he just wanted to move dirt, he could move dirt. And what he's done is he's just followed everybody around. He doesn't plant much, but he loves the irrigation system, helping fix the irrigation system. He could probably repair it if he wanted to. He's been the foreman for all the brigades of wheelbarrows for hauling bark dust. He tells everybody what to do, and he knows what to do. He tells them what row to go to and how to do it and what layers. And I just see little things.
So for you as a parent, this sounds like a real enrichment of, you know, your family life, having this level of involvement.
Oh, it's been fantastic because I'm not a natural gardener. I always thought of myself as having kind of a black thumb, but I wanted him to know how to grow his own food. And so I figured if we participated in a community garden, I'd get better at it, and he'd grow up with it being just second nature. In our yard, he'll go to pick strawberries, and I watch how he uses his hands in between the plants to get to the fruit. And, you know, a little kid, you know, he's not just grabbing in, he does it just like I see Libby do it, or, you know, different people in the garden. He's picked up little gestures, or he was harvesting carrots the other day, and he was running his finger around the edge, just like Libby had just done, you know, to see if it was big enough to pull. And then he took his digging tool, and he didn't just go dig, you know, charge it. He did little bitty digs at it so that it would come out whole and not dig into the carrot. And he won't acknowledge that he knows those things, but
you
it's
know,
just second nature.
He doesn't need to.
Right.
Right? Because what I see here is you have a village, your community garden, raising a child as well as garden.
Absolutely.
And he's learning from everybody here instead of just one person.
Absolutely.
What a treat for you as a parent.
Oh, it's fantastic. I mean, I come in here and I don't have to work. I don't have to think about him. He just, I go and I do work and I learn and visit with other members of the garden, and he's off, you know, and he stays with one person as long as he's interested in what they're doing, and he learns something from that, and then he runs off and goes and works with somebody else, and it's just been great. It's just been absolutely wonderful, and he's the only child, you know, so he gets all the
Oh, what a
attention.
treat. And he will grow up expecting that you help each other. You learn from each other. And he'll turn right around and do it himself. Oh, wow.
And it's great, and he's always been given respect, and so, you know, that's...
Sounds to me like your whole garden, your cooperative garden, is doing a fine job of growing a boy, too.
I think so too.
I've developed a childcare relationship with those kids because I got so affectionate with them in the garden. So I see them outside the garden now as well. So many people go to the older member and ask him gardening advice because he's been gardening his whole life. It's just very, it's a very amazing what happens when people come together in the cooperative way, the kinds of things that can emerge from those relationships.
You know, you mentioned also, and we'll get a chance to see a little bit, a couple of special kinds of gardens. You mentioned a Dryland project. Would you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, the Dryland Farm Project is a grain growing experiment. Some guy who bought 6 acres of land in order to keep it from being developed was approached, and we asked him, would you let us use it for agricultural experimentation? And he said not only yes, but he got totally involved in the project and is now driving tractors and planting seeds. And so the Dryland Farm Project has been 2 years in the making. We've grown wheat, flax, oats, barley, quinoa, camelina, corn for grinding, and we've purchased a thresher that's a pedal-powered thresher that the Amish people make, and we're just experimenting with what we can grow locally with no irrigation, and it's been amazing.
Which is notable in your area because your rainfall is something like, what, 14 or 15 inches a year, dry half the year, or whatever?
It's usually dry from the middle of June until the middle of September.
So, you know, that's a critical kind of experiment given people's desire for grain.
It is, and we just expanded. The first year we did 1 acre, the second year we did 5 acres, and off of the extra 4 acres, just last week we harvested 3 tons of wheat. So we're kind of overwhelmed and blown away, and we're sort of like, wow, how did this happen? You know, we're going to figure out whether to give the wheat to the bakery or to the schools, or, you know, ask the bakery to make bread for the schools, or we're not sure what we're going to even do with all of what we've produced, but it's really empowering.
You also have a kind of cooperative chicken coop?
We do have a cooperative chicken coop. It's across the street from the community garden in the backyard of the 80-year-old guy. Get your daily goodies. Here you go. Move out of the way. Come on. There's 7 people that are involved, well, actually 8 different families. One is sort of an alternate, and each one of the 7 of us have 1 day a week that we take care of the chickens, letting them out in the morning, feeding them, getting them water, and then putting them away at night. And then we gather the eggs on that 1 day. So we have 17 chickens. They're not all laying yet. They're about 6 months old. But we had to kind of foster them through the chicken phase, the little chick phase. And they started laying eggs about 3 or 4 weeks ago, and we're up to getting about, I don't know, 13, 14 eggs a day.
All right.
And it's great.
You had other points. I want to make sure that we've got every little gem you wanted to share here.
Well, I think the leadership issue is definitely something I want to give voice to, because I think community gardens do need leadership. Even the Dryland Farm Project needs leadership. And I think that if I think we have a crisis in our world these days, it's a crisis of leadership, that people are not necessarily comfortable owning their own power, launching a new project without feeling like they know every absolute thing about it. And we're just finding that we can't afford to wait for that kind of expertise to emerge, that we have to step into leadership roles as we are.
And learn it as we go along.
Learn as we go, be willing to make mistakes, be willing to say, I can help with that, I can't help with that. And it gets back to that shared model of leadership where people say, well, I will do this part. I know how to do this part.
Yeah.
We've got one woman who never comes in the garden, but she's our bookkeeper. She keeps our books in our checkbook and relates to the bank for us. And we never see her, but she does that piece.
And she, you'd be happy to pay her in potatoes and zucchini and carrots.
Exactly,
Sure.
exactly. Sure. So I think the contributed gifts and talents make up for everything that we need. And it's just amazing. I'm amazed at what can be grown in a collective garden that goes way beyond. And I grew a lot of stuff. I mean, you knew in that last interview, I grew a lot of different things, but we've got perennials here. We've got blueberries, strawberries, raspberries, apple trees, 6 or 8 types of greens. We've got a big hoop house, a 43-foot hoop house that grows tomatoes and basil and cucumbers for us every year, and green peppers, artichokes, asparagus. It's all here.
So you've got not only great variety, but you've also nurtured relationships that probably go way beyond what you do here in the garden.
We have. I think that our community in the neighborhood has definitely gotten a lot stronger, and people are friendlier, people are more cooperative, people come to each other's aid. One woman keeps bees here at the garden, and I used to keep my bees. I still have my bees, but someone else manages them for me. She'll call me up if she needs some equipment or if she needs me to help her with a beehive in some respect. So we're calling it back and forth on each other more easily than we would have. And I think probably 3/4 of the people in my garden are not people that I would have known otherwise if this were not for the garden.
So going back to what you said, you wanted to do a food resilience project.
Right.
And so partly I see that you've got, more local food, but you also have built resilience in terms of not just the food growing capacity, but the people cooperating capacity should other things be needed of you.
I actually think that was the hidden gift that I didn't know was going to come from this, is how much camaraderie is happening. Our community is becoming friendlier all the time. We're involved in cooperative projects of all ilks. It's not just gardening, but it's like this translates into other fundraisers when someone has a medical emergency or a death in the family, or it just feels like it's a gentler place to live and a friendlier place to live. It's always been a great place to live, but it's getting better all the time. And I think the community gardens are definitely playing their role in that. There's no way of really knowing, of course, but I just see that even at the food bank, a lot of the community gardens will truck stuff over to the food bank every week. Their extra will go, and we try to keep track online of how much is being donated so that we have some sort of record of that. And I think this year we're going to be outreaching to people who have individual gardens to do the same thing.
Fabulous.
So that we're feeding our, more needful populations. I also have a little bee in my bonnet right now about a garden that's existing on the property right next to the food bank that it used to be run by the Y, and I'm not sure it's going to continue to be run by the Y. So I want to go to the food bank recipients and ask them if they would like to garden on that site to create food that would directly go into the food bank coffers, so that they're providing for themselves as well. I touched on the leadership question. I want to let you know that every garden deals differently with its leadership. Like one intentional community actually hired someone to come in and garden with them twice a week. So they have a paid coordinator. They happen to have the money and the resources to do that. Other gardens divvy up the leadership so that one person's in charge of the fruit, and someone else is in charge of the greens, and someone else is in charge of the squash plants. And so different gardens do leadership differently, but some kind of leadership is needed. Okay. It can't just be too loose or it falls apart. So I think that's one thing. The the other thing I want to reiterate is I think overplanting is a good idea because you fend off scarcity thinking that way. You fend off the fear factor of I'm not going to get enough.
Okay.
So it's nice to have enough space. You do have to make agreements with the landowners, and you want to make an agreement for longevity, like how long can we garden here if you let us use your land? Because it takes a lot of time to get a garden up to speed.
I would imagine the fencing and the water and the irrigation and stuff, and you want to, if you're going to invest that, you want it to be there for some years to come.
I recommend for people to do a 5-year minimum. We were given an 8-year, which was more comfortable for me. One couple that decided to use a vacant lot that they owned next to their house told their kids that should they die, they were in their 70s, that the community, the neighborhood community garden got preferential use of that land for a minimum of 10 years. And the kids were going to have to wait for whatever inheritance value that land would provide. So people are taking this seriously.
Yeah,
They're definitely,
that's fabulous.
Yeah, that sort of surprised me, but they felt committed. So
that's fabulous.
yeah.
More power to you. Many more gardens to you. Many more gardens all over.
I don't know if I need any more
Not
gardens.
for you, but out of this work, out of this
Yeah.
experiment, which obviously landed on fertile ground, having 25 gardens by now.
I hope that our community is a demonstration community for more communities to take this up as a project, because it spreads pretty quickly when people start realizing you can do it, we can do it, you can do it, you can do it, and it's something people apparently want to do. Food is really big in this community right now.
I think local food is, Port Townsend isn't alone in that. I think more and more people are waking up to that, particularly with the downturn in the economy, and saying, that's what I want to work on. That's what I take care of.
It's so basic. It's so necessary. And it inadvertently puts us in touch with the life forces in nature, so we're paying attention to the weather, the bugs, the soil, the plants. And when you start getting in touch with that, what else matters? You know, it's like you're hooked up to your life support system.
That's right.
So
that's right. Great.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks for sharing this with us. Thanks for the model of growing food together more broadly.
You're very welcome, Janaya.
You're watching Peak Moments, locally reliant living in challenging times. I'm with Judy Alexander, who's organizing her whole community and letting them go off and grow. Thanks.
Thanks, Janaya.